didn't think about that. And she said, we're witnessing the Israelization of America.
She's spot on.
Yeah. How sad. Thank you both for taking the time. And Rula has to leave also. So this is how much she wanted to see you, Annelle. Folks, I'm joined by Rula, Annelle. They are guests who've been on the show before. Dr. Annelle Sheline is a research fellow at the Quincy Institute. She was also at the State Department, but she resigned last year, March 2024, over the Biden administration's complicity in Israel's war crimes, which is now a genocide. Rula Jebreal, you love. She's been on the show before. Rula is a Palestinian American, a scholar, a writer, and author. Her book on genocide, it was released in Italy, Genocidio, and we're waiting for the English version of it soon. And folks, this is the 2-year, for lack of a better word, anniversary of Hamas's terror attacks in Israel. And since then, in those past 2 years, Israel has engaged in what the entire world, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, international scholars on genocide have declared a genocide, a campaign of ethnic cleansing, where the numbers, and these are the undercount, are Israel has killed at least 65,000 people, mostly civilians, although Lancet, the medical journal, says that's a massive undercount by 40%. There are hundreds of thousands of casualties. There are more child amputees in Gaza than in anywhere else in the world. More children have been killed by Israel in Gaza in the past 2 years than all the other war zones in the world combined. There's phase 5 starvation. This is all happening in real time. We've seen a genocide with our eyes. It has radicalized a global population to the point where all the numbers are coming out, and young Israel has lost the youth. It has lost the narrative. It has lost the culture. It is losing American Jews, according to the latest poll that came out. Mamdani, who most likely will become the next mayor of New York, young Jews in New York are voting for him, not in spite of, but because of his views on Israel and Palestine. However, Rula and Annelle, we still see the establishment class, both the donors such as Larry Ellison and his Nepo son David Ellison, who just gave $150 million for 41-year-old Substacker Barry Weiss to ruin CBS News. And it's all connected, folks. We're going to connect all the dots. Everyone thinks this is disparate. It's not. And we've seen Larry Ellison now buy TikTok because TikTok was seen by both Democrats and Republicans as being this radicalizing force. And Van Jones, just a couple of days ago, I know Rula and Annelle, you saw that, he said all these kids are watching Dead Gaza Baby, Dead Gaza Baby, Dead Gaza Baby. Did he? Dead Gaza Baby on TikTok, and he blamed Iran and Qatar propaganda. And we still haven't seen a majority of Democrats come out and call it a genocide, although Mallory McMorrow finally came out yesterday and grudgingly called it a genocide. And you saw Senator Sanders call it a genocide. So we're seeing a shift, folks. We're seeing a shift. This is a brave new world. I have gray hair. I never thought we'd see such a remarkable shift in my life. But I want to take it back, if I can, Rula, to Annelle, because a lot of people are blaming Trump. And I just was on with Joanne Reed. We had 2,500 people watching. And Joy and I said, the buck stops with Biden, because this could have stopped with Biden. I know Democrats hate hearing it, but we don't bend the knee here. We keep it real. Joe Biden, his complicity, his green light to Netanyahu and Israel to commit this genocide, his utter lack of empathy, his utter lack of trademark empathy for Palestinians. If you think I'm out of pocket here with this characterization, Annelle, you worked in the Biden administration, you were in the State Department. I give the ball to you. Am I off here?
You're not off at all. And this was something that the Josh Paul, Stacey Gilbert, Tara Kabash, the other people who resigned with me under Biden, we've been observing the ways that a lot of these Biden officials are now suddenly coming out and saying things like, we should condition weapons to Israel now. Wasn't appropriate when I could have done something about it, but now it would be. This is the line from Sullivan. Also, Matt Miller coming out and saying now he believes Israel was committing war crimes, despite the fact that he was the one smirking so offensively, but time and again repeating this, as you said, complete lack of empathy that the Biden administration all the way across the board showed for the horrific suffering that it was directly enabling in Gaza. You had Jack Lew and former U.S. ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, and the former Middle East envoy, David Satterfield, wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs last month about stopping the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They were both in positions to have actually done that.
Yep.
So my, you know, Stacey Gilbert was the one who really was just, I think, had smoke coming out of her ears as you suddenly see these these appointee, these Biden era officials coming out and changing their tune. And so she was the one who galvanized the rest of us to write this statement that was just covered by the Huffington Post, where we condemn what these officials are doing because we know the only reason they're doing it is to launder their reputations, to
Yep.
kind of stuff down the memory hole the fact that all of this started under Biden. You had starvation under Biden, you had genocide under Biden. But because now they're understanding that Americans are opposed to genocide, they want to portray this as if this was a Trump phenomenon. This wasn't the Democrats, this wasn't their fault. And so that in a future Democratic administration, if we ever have one again, that they would be that they could present themselves as somehow appropriate to march right into a new Democratic administration, which it's interesting because on the one hand, I recognize the fact that people are going to change their tune on this issue. You have people who maybe initially did not recognize it as a genocide, or you have people who weren't really paying attention, and now we are seeing people waking up, as you said, kind of the Israel has lost the narrative. And so obviously we who have been, people like Rula who have been screaming about this for the past 2 years and longer, although it's frustrating when people are only now sort of waking up to it, we need to welcome that because that is how movements grow. However, that is different than someone who is in a position of power who set up the circumstances that we see now, trying to pretend as if they were not in a position to have done this earlier, or trying to pretend that their hands are clean and they're blameless and we should give them power again at some point in the future. Um, so it is interesting because I do think sometimes there's an understandable tendency of someone who's been working on this for so long to be frustrated by those who are kind of only now coming around. Um, but again, I do think there's a bright line between those who directly enabled this and could have stopped it, and those who are sort of only now just sort of waking up.
And now let me ask you one follow up before I give it to Rula, because I want to name some of these names: Jack Kirby, Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, Anthony Blinken, Matt Miller. All these names, folks, for the nerds listening, just they'll try really hard, but just make their life a bit uncomfortable. Just remind them that they were completely all in and gave the green light. And what I heard, Annelle, from people that I know that worked in the Biden administration or work in State Department, is there's so many people like you, Annelle, tried their best to raise their voice. So many people tried their best to ask questions. So many people were confounded and furious as to why Biden, with his trademark empathy, just refused to budge. And he was insulated with this core group of people that I just mentioned, who just refused to get any other access to dissenting views that were common. Like you weren't the only one, but yet you were one of the few people who publicly resigned. And I want to ask you, what was the red line for you where you said, you know what? I can no longer be part of this administration and I'm done. I'm out. What kind of clicked in your head that said, I'm going to publicly break and potentially ruin my political future over the Biden policy?
When they cut off funding to UNRWA, I think that was a really just it. Everything up to that point could sort of, I mean, not to justify it or excuse it, but there are ways that it wasn't that surprising, given the extent to which the United States is the U.S. foreign policy elite use American interests as so closely tied to Israel's, the way that the United States was supporting Israel after October 7th. But then in January of 2024, when on the basis of extremely flimsy information, and I saw this intelligence and it was not convincing, the Biden administration cut off funding to UNRWA. So it was absolutely so clearly a policy of collective punishment UNRWA is the institution that not only was sort of indispensable inside of Gaza, not only for providing healthcare and medicines and school, but food and for the United States had funded it for years as part of the UN. It's a neutral institution. But Israel has tried for years to discredit it because it holds the records of Palestinians, and it is the clearest sort of institutional representation of Palestinians' right to return. So Israel has been trying to get rid of it for a very long time. And then the fact that the Biden administration was willing to do this, I think was that was where it just the cruelty was intentional.
Mm.
I also the suicide of Aaron Bushnell in February of 2024 was, I mean, I still can't really talk about it without it was just the desperation he so clearly felt to self-immolate in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington. I think that was another example of, if a U.S. service member is going to kill themselves over this, resigning and, as you said, burning bridges, to whatever sort of alternative professional career I might have had in Washington, is a very small price to pay. So that was also a really big factor.
No, thank you, Annelle. And Rula, for those who are joining us, Rula messaged me last week. She goes, "Get Annelle on. I want to speak with Annelle." And so I immediately messaged Annelle, and I'm like, I have to set up this date, this Substack date between all three of us. And thank you all for tuning in. And thank you for making time, Rula, because Rula has to run for a flight, but she still made time. Here we are, Rula. And you have this poster behind you of Genocidia, which is in Italian, it means genocide. And I asked this question. I've been asking this question of Qasim Rashid, whom he was on earlier. I asked this question of Joey, and I have to ask this question of you. What more evidence do people need to see for them to conclude that what Israel is doing is a genocide? And why does language matter? Because I start off this program just giving top of my head some statistics, but we've all seen these images. Even Van Jones has seen these images. Why, oh, why is there still reluctance and resistance, especially from Democrats and the establishment, to call a thing for what it is, which is a genocide?
Thank you for this question, Waj. But allow me to start this by saying Annelle is a hero. To all the people who are following, it takes bravery and courage to stand up to an administration that happens to be a democratic one that came to power after Black Lives Matter and after the destruction of the first Trump administration and told voters, we
Yeah.
will democracy. We told voters, you mentioned Blinken. He said, and I will never forget these words, the difference between democracy and autocracy is the respect of international law. Then he turned around and basically abandoned all these principles in Gaza. It's very important to celebrate and honor Annelle because she gave us hope in a moment where we felt, as Palestinians, as people who really believe in democracy and fought for democracy and try, like you was, to create a bridge and being an ambassadors between East and West. Try always our part of the world. There's something good about the United States. Yes, there's racism, there's colonialism, there's misguided policies, but there's something really good about this amazing experiment. And then finally, I get these messages from my people in the Middle East where they say, why should we study international law or law at all when it doesn't protect us? When for the first time in the history, sanctions are being used to enable and facilitate genocide, to sanction people who are investigating war crimes and crimes against humanity, and not to deter genocide. That your question goes to why. Why? It's very simple. Because this is not an Israeli only genocide. This is an American backed genocide. This is an American funded genocide. This is an American armed genocide. This is an American genocide that is being justified by our colleagues in the media, by a president of the United States who lied on television like Biden and said he saw with his own eyes
Yeah.
beheading, by a president who should have known and his administration that the war on UNRWA started decades before October 7th. They're waiting for the right chance to dismantle UNRWA. If we have stage 5 famine and starvation in Gaza, because Biden decided to cut UNRWA, knowing very well he's cutting the agency at its knees in a moment where they're being bombed and being people where UNRWA and basically UN officials being killed at the large numbers in Gaza. We also, what we see with videos, but every government actually have satellites and they have satellite images and they could see even further than you and me. Biden had evidence since January 2024 of what was happening in Gaza. But I truly believe, and he heard very clearly Israeli generals, Israeli politicians talking about destruction of Gaza as the main goal, so Palestinians can never live in Gaza. They were not talking about destruction of Hamas. They're saying we need to destroy Gaza. If you look from the satellites at Rafah, or you look at Jabalia, let's say Jabalia, northern Gaza, it's gone. Gone. The level of destruction exceeds by far what happened to Dresden, what happened with Hiroshima with an atomic bomb. They can see that with their own eyes. Yet Blinken kept traveling around the world pretending he was trying to, to seek a ceasefire or seek a political solution when the U.S. actually vetoed 6 times a UN binding ceasefire resolutions. We see all of this, and now we're seeing that what's happening in Gaza is being important here.
Yeah.
When he bombed basically, when they killed the boat, everybody on the boat, and bombed the boat in Venezuelan boat in international water, that was a war crime. Where do you think that kind of tactic came from? When I think of what's happening in Portland and the militarization of America and basically military occupation, where did this come from? From the West Bank. When you look at what's happening today, this happens because a lot of people in the establishment, Democrats and Republicans, decided to sacrifice democracy itself just to defend Israel crimes and genocide. And I imagined everything in my life. I never imagined they're willing to create this suicide pact. They're willing to obliterate every norm, every rule, every law in order to preserve Israel. Not only whole delusional idea that military occupation, apartheid, and genocide is a legitimate way to act in this world in the 21st century. I am stunned that this idea keep being discussed by the likes of Van Jones and others as, we don't want to see the side effects. They disturb us, but we're comfortable with the policies. I never thought we would live in a world where people who we thought are progressive and decent people drop the mask and show the monstrosity behind it.
It's, you mentioned suicide pact, and oftentimes I look at this. I was having a conversation with some friends who are formerly of the government, and we talked about it. We're like the self-destructive type of pact for Israel, Annelle, right? You're seeing Schumer. We'll talk about a little bit more about this. Schumer and Jeffries, they read the polls. They read the same polls that I do. They're like, you know what? We've seen the polls. It doesn't matter. We're still going to spend more time attacking Mamdani than Donald Trump. We're still going to hug AIPAC. Even though the Democratic Party has a lower favorability rating than Donald Trump right now, it's the lowest since 1994, we're still going to go all in for Israel. We're still going to go all in for AIPAC. Van Jones will make an ass out of himself, just being utterly cruel on Bill Maher show, which was the world's worst, the rogue gallery of Thomas Friedman, Bill Maher, and Van Jones. It was literally like, I've been waiting for 20 years for the world to finally see these people for who they are. I was joking with Joy when no one listens to us. I'm like, these white moderates aren't your friends. The Thomas Friedmans, the Bill Mahers with his Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian rhetoric, the Ezra Kleins, y'all don't believe us. And the reason is because there were youthful white Democrats and white moderates, and people are like, let's throw the transgender under the bus. Let's throw the Palestinians under the bus. Let's throw the Muslims under the bus. Let's throw the undocumented under the bus. And now they see, oh, you can't ignore what's happening in Israel because now those very same tactics are happening in Chicago and Portland. And one of the viewers, I think it was Donna, 10 minutes ago, she asked a very important question. It seems like a basic question, I know. With all this damage, all this death, why the hell do we keep supporting Israel? And her exact question was, why is Israel so important to the United States? And I think that's a very honest question that most Americans, honestly, Annelle, they don't understand. Can you please break it down for folks?
I mean, I think these are all related in thinking about like why is it that Democrats are willing to go against what the vast majority of Democratic voters, and including at this point the majority of American voters, are do no longer want to send this unconditional support to Israel.
A
And
majority
it's
of
because
American Jews, according to the latest poll.
right, right. I mean, it's wild, but it's so not only so this question of why would Democrats seemingly act against their own political self-interest to continue to support Israel, and why in general does like what explains why the U.S. continues to support Israel so unconditionally and to the tune of $30 billion over the past 2 years. Um, it, it's because our politics is captured by moneyed interests. I mean, this this gets to like the root of so many problems in our society, but it's the fact that our democracy no longer really exists. I mean, to the extent that we
Mm.
have a democracy, it allows various corporate interests to throw vast amounts of money at elections to get the candidate that they know, that they have bought and paid for. So it's not only the Israel lobby, but it's the weapons industry, also the pharmaceutical industry, although I'm not an expert in that, but just these various corporate lobbies that are so influential. And so now, knowing that, Trump, as someone who obviously is very motivated by money, is hugely corrupt, beyond just the normal level of American corruption, it's not surprising that he would continue to support Israel given the kinds of people he's surrounded himself with, despite the fact that it is increasingly difficult for the MAGA movement to portray what Trump is doing as in any way America first.
Right?
It's Israel first. So, and thus far, you only have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey speaking out against that. But, increasingly, I hope you will have other representatives, other people perhaps running in the upcoming midterms that, again, I think that a lot of the America First agenda is, I find abhorrent, but there is this question of, well, how do you explain, if you're trying to go for an America First foreign policy, these vast amounts of money to subsidize Israeli healthcare, to subsidize Israel attacking countries around the region, including a major non-NATO ally like Qatar? It's just we're undermining our own interests at every turn. But it's
Okay, and now can you,
because
for people who don't know, I don't want to, before you continue, just to give it some depth, can you just explain to people what happened in Qatar? Because most people don't understand it, and I just think we just have to just sit with it for 1 second and explain how reckless Israel was and why this was such a big deal with Qatar. Because what's common to you isn't common to everyone.
so, I think part of why it didn't get attention is because we know Israel has bombed Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Tunisia, and but a lot of those are not necessarily, from an American perspective, not as problematic. Whereas hitting Qatar, which is a major non-NATO U.S. ally, the site of the largest U.S. military base in the region, and the fact that they hit Hamas negotiators when they had just received a proposal from the Trump administration for a ceasefire, and Qatar hosts Hamas negotiators at the request of the United States. So not only was Israel hitting a key U.S. partner that has invested trillions of dollars in the United States and holds vast numbers of government bonds similar to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but they were undermining the very premise of negotiation itself. If Israel is going to target the negotiators, and we'd seen this before when they hit Ismail Haniyeh, but that was in Tehran. And so I think Americans are like, Israel bombed Tehran, it's not that big of a deal. But again, like that also undermined the premise that how can you have negotiate? How could anyone take seriously the idea that Israel wants to negotiate anything if they keep murdering the negotiators?
Literally.
So, which I know we don't have a lot of time, so I do just want to highlight the fact
Yeah,
that this
please.
current round of negotiations is just theater. It's just a chance to distract everyone again, to pretend like this is going to result in something, in a ceasefire, which Israel, if they do end up agreeing to, which I don't think they will, but if there's some kind of an agreement, Israel's just going to violate it whenever it feels like it. And it was designed to allow it to do so, so then it, won't the efforts to say, Israel broke a ceasefire that it had agreed to, it's all vague enough that people can sort of ignore that. But it's all just an effort to distract us from the fact that international pressure is growing. Although a lot of the emphasis at the UN General Assembly, I think, to recognize the state of Palestine was somewhat misplaced because it didn't have any actual effects on the ground, it is representative of the fact that especially European countries, this opposition, and Rula can speak to the amazing people of Italy, putting the rest of us to shame for holding general strikes to end the genocide. Um, but again, so even though the recognition of Palestine is sort of a somewhat empty symbolic gesture, it's representative of this swing in public opinion and this international pressure that was growing that I think, Trump and Israel strategically are trying to diffuse by getting everyone to now focus on, what's going on in Sharm el-Sheikh, is it going to lead to a ceasefire while the assault on Gaza City continues, while people continue to die and be starved? This isn't going to lead to anything similar to the Biden, the endless round and rounds of, the latest round of ceasefire negotiations. We are working tirelessly towards a ceasefire that Biden constantly said.
We have time. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go to you. I just want to tell Annelle, we have time. It's up to you. I'm just mindful of your time. So stick around for as long as you want. I'm here. Rula, continue.
Yeah, I think Annelle is spot on. It's not only theater, but it's meant also to thwart and stop this momentum. Actually, Europe was discussing this week sanctioning Israel, kicking them out of every sport initiative, music festival, whatever. And they halted all of that, saying, well, now we have a peace initiative, a peace plan. We cannot, we don't want to disturb and bother the peace plan. We had 50 boats, the flotilla, the global Sumud flotilla, heading towards Gaza. And immediately, governments in Italy, especially the Meloni neo-fascist government, start attacking the flotilla. It's like they are actually compromising peace, a peace initiative. What peace initiative? I mean, it's basically there's no mechanism that addresses the underlying causes of all the conflict, the occupation, the apartheid, and the genocide. There's nothing about this. As if discussing this is the problem and not actually the policies that are obliterating people's lives, annihilating Palestinians. And again, it goes to the center that Palestinian lives and dignity and freedom has never been centered in the discourse. But Trump talks about a peace plan. There's no Palestinians are being involved in drafting the peace plans. Not only that, the Palestinian Authority that recognized Israel, collaborate with Israel, was preventing to coming to the United Nations a week earlier.
That's right.
This charade, again and again, whether it's done by Biden or by Trump, one thing is clear: Trump is eager to get some kind of Nobel Peace Prize. He thinks that liberating the hostages will get him there. Probably people around him need to tell him, Habibi, listen, it's not happening. You might need to end a genocide in order to get something. But you know what? He underestimated again and again Netanyahu's ability to thwart any negotiation. And then one that is very disturbing, especially in a day like this when we discuss October 7, which was an atrocity.
Yeah.
I mean, and we, I speak as somebody like, I would like an investigation on October 7. It's been delayed for 2 years. I'd like an independent Israeli investigation on October 7. When they allowed the Hannibal Doctrine to take place, who really fired and where. I mean, I looked at the footage, I was like, there's some footages that's been clear that Apache helicopter bombed certain areas. We have generals speaking saying we killed everybody because we had an order that nobody goes back to Gaza with more hostages. And again, 2 weeks before October 7, Yossi Cohen, the head of the Mossad, was in Qatar, sent by Netanyahu, asking for more funding for Hamas itself. So again, we need to go to the fact that they propped up Hamas, financed Hamas. Hamas did what they did, and now Palestinians. This is used as an excuse to ethnically cleanse Palestinians in the West Bank and to basically exterminating them in Gaza. I want just to remind everybody, it's not us only who are saying that. It's the International Court of Justice. It's every human rights organization, including Israeli one. I want to remind everybody that an Israeli general, the leader of the opposition, Yair Galant, said 3 months ago, the IDF is shooting children for hobby sport. These are hardcore claims and not accusation. These are facts, because for the first time in history, we have soldiers who are filming themselves committing crimes because they understand that America will defend them, will thwart any attempt to hold them accountable. The fact that from this process, they're demanding from the Palestinians two things: not only the release of the hostages, that there's no accountability for the genocide. I hope people will continue to resist in the courts, collecting evidence, protesting in the streets, holding every politician that supported the genocide accountable. But we cannot be distracted by this charade, because it will show itself to be a charade, exactly like the Biden, Blinken charades. They might get the hostages out, and I wish they will get out because I think they deserve to be free. But this will not end the genocide. The only way to end and stop the genocide is by the people and not governments that insist and fight back and resist and demand justice for all.
Annelle, and what you've seen, though, is that the numbers have come out increasingly, all the poll numbers, Pew, Gallup, CNN numbers, is that Americans, Democrats, American Jews, even like a chunk of Republicans are done. They've been done with this war. They want a ceasefire. A majority of Americans call it a genocide. A third of Republicans, which is actually a much bigger number than people think, are also part and parcel of this America First movement. Also, they've been radicalized. Some of them are anti-Semites, but there's different buckets. Some of them are just young people who are MAGA on everything. Then when you hear them speak about Israel Palestine, they sound like a left-wing, pro-Palestinian activist with the kafir. You're like, wait, what just happened? Because they've seen a genocide in real time, right? American Jews are done with this, and yet we hear the establishment. And by the establishment, I'm talking about the Acela train from New York to D.C. I'm talking about funders, donors, AIPAC, ADL, Democrats, Republicans, those folks in the NatSec sector, military-industrial complex, who keep saying, we need to support Israel. We still have to support Israel. And average Jose's and Joes and Janes now are watching this, and they're asking, why? Like, why? What's the response? Like, what is their narrative? And what's the response to that narrative? Well, if we don't support Israel, look, nothing's perfect, but then Iran's going to take her. We have to support Israel because otherwise it's the Saudis in the Gulf. We have to support Israel because, hey, you know what? Even though it's terrible, the greater threat is Assyria, run by extremists, or Yemen. Your breakdown as an expert on the Middle East with that claim.
I think it's increasingly difficult to sell that story. And in particular, you think of the ways that it no longer, for a long time, the United States was promoting that story that all of the Arab Middle East needed to be united alongside Israel against Iran, because Iran was the big baddie, most destabilizing actor in the region. When increasingly, a lot of the Arab states, including very important U.S. partners like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE, now see Israel as the most destabilizing actor in the region and are reconsidering their reliance on the U.S. security guarantee and wondering, is it worth the paper it's written on? Because clearly America is not going to be able, is not willing to prevent Israel from attacking Qatar or in the future the negotiations right now in Sharm. What if Israel decides it wants to try and bomb the Hamas negotiation team in Egypt? I mean, at this point, I don't think I'd be all that surprised. Um, so as far as where the Gulf is on this, I think it is unfortunate because I do think a lot of people continue to assume or to question why we're not seeing more opposition from the Arab countries. And I think that's just a misplaced um, faith in those leaders. I mean, these are deeply autocratic leaders, and their societies very much support the people of Palestine. But these are not democracies, and these rulers have been bought and paid for by the United States for so long. The U.S. has long cultivated this strategy by which these countries are so dependent on the United States, so they have to go along with the U.S. agenda for the region, or risk Israel coming after them, the U.S. No longer selling them weapons. But again, a lot of these countries are rethinking that dependence. It would take a very long time for these countries to shift because they've invested hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. weaponry and just the entire sort of security architecture of the Middle East is dependent on the United States. Um, but this sort of narrative that Iran is the big baddie, I mean, that's been weakening since 2023 when you saw Saudi Arabia and Iran normalize relations. Um, it's just very clear that Israel is in fact the actor that other countries are worried about. But as far as how to, like, this narrative continues to be kind of, they try to sell it to Americans. I think they know they can't sell it to Americans anymore, and that's why they bought TikTok. That's why
There you
Barry
go.
Weiss controls CBS now.
There you go.
They're just trying to censor the information. That's why Israel has murdered hundreds of journalists in Gaza, and why you aren't seeing as many horrific images coming out of Gaza, because the people documenting the horrors have all been systematically murdered. So I think because they've lost the narrative, now they're just trying to censor that information and again kill the people who were sending out the the live streaming the genocide that we've all been watching for 2 years.
Annelle has set me up perfectly. Annelle, do you have a couple more minutes or do you have to run? Couple more minutes?
I can stay.
Okay, good. Rula, and because I want to bring it all together, because Annelle set me up. I swear this was not planned before. And you literally, my train of thought, you set me up perfectly for the question I was going to ask Rula. Uh, I want you to let's just focus for a second on what happened on Bill Maher's show. Bill Maher's show on Friday. Bill Maher's show is on HBO. HBO is owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. Larry Ellison, on and off again, the richest man on earth, the single largest donor to the IDF, hard right, pro Zionist Trumper, just bought TikTok. Dropsite just came out with an email where Larry Ellison was able to vet Marco Rubio for the Trump administration. And Larry Ellison, a billionaire who's not a government official, said he's good on Israel. Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison, the Nepo baby, runs Paramount after the merger between Paramount and Skydance. Paramount now owns CBS News and also owns BET, Nickelodeon, and Comedy Central. Comedy Central, of course, has The Daily Show. Larry Ellison, again, folks, wants to buy Warner Brothers Discovery that owns CNN, HBO. All right. Uh, for those who tune in, who don't know, the reason why Barry Weiss was trending yesterday is Larry Ellison, the Nepo baby son of David Ellison, the Nepo baby son of Larry Ellison, overpaid Barry Weiss's Substack Free Press to the tune of 150 million, even though my janky videos sometimes get more views than the Free Press. So if anyone wants to give me $150 million, here I am. All right. Now let's go to Friday. Friday night, you got Bill Maher, who white moderates and Democrats, they loved him for years, even though Rula, you and me, you went on his show. We kept saying, listen, guys, he's deeply problematic. He's deeply problematic. He's openly racist against Arabs, Palestinian Muslims. And we were told, whatever. Next to him was Thomas Friedman, the go-to op-ed writer that Joe Biden read every week, right? Then next to him was Van Jones. And Van Jones said, you know what? The problem isn't DEI or CRT, it's Iran and Qatar. And Iran and Qatar's disinformation campaign through TikTok. And then he said, Rula, people these days, kids on TikTok, they see dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby, dead Gaza baby. Did he? Dead Gaza baby. And the crowd thought that was so hilarious. Oh, they applauded and laughed. All of it's connected. And it goes back to a point you made 30 minutes ago, the casual dehumanization of Palestinians. I said a lot, but I tried my best to connect the dots. But I give the ball to you, Rula.
Listen, every genocide starts with words. It starts with dehumanization, and it starts with collective criminalization of an entire group, the musterification of that group. What happened Friday night and what happened, I would go back actually to something that happened, I believe, in May this year, when Ta-Nehisi Coates, with his amazing book, The Messenger, went on CBS morning show and talked about his experience in Palestine and how he, as an African American, felt he was in Jim Crow America. He made a direct link between white supremacists or white supremacy and Jewish supremacy in Israel and Palestine, which is, it's the Zionist project. Is a Jewish majority dominating, and controlling the land with, segregating and excluding and ethnically cleansing Palestinians. And I think the reaction to that with Tony Capullo would basically call them a terrorist, an extremist. And I think it triggered all kind of reactions inside CBS. I believe Barry was immediately defended him, saying that he was very that kind of opinion is being attacked, and it's a very small opinion. It's the majority of the opinion in mainstream media, where people, I will never forget Dana Bash talking to a representative who told her there's 15,000 children killed in Gaza. And she said to her, without empathy, without compassion, it's like, well, at least they were not raped. There are 15,000 children, babies killed in Gaza. And the reaction of a journalist on CNN, a Sunday show, none of the Sunday shows ever had a Palestinian, and her reaction, well, it doesn't matter. They were not raped, referencing to the allegation that there was rape on October 7th, as if a crime justified the murder of 15,000 babies. And then fast forward, I think they lost the narrative. I agree with Annelle totally. They lost the propaganda war. It's over. People will never believe them. And when they lost it, I believe, they lost it when they issued 3-4 communications. When in March 2024, they killed 15 paramedics, murdered them, buried them after they killed them with their ambulance, and they said they violated the rules. Then we discovered through a video of somebody that was about to be executed who filmed the whole scene. He gave us evidence that they were lying and debunked totally their lie. And I remember his last words where he said, "Mother, forgive me. I dedicate my life to saving lives." And we all saw this. The lies were debunked in real time by Palestinians filming their own extermination and destruction. And then the elite decided at certain points, we really don't care about the truth. Actually, we don't want the truth. It's what Van Jones was saying. I don't want to see these things without providing evidence saying it's Iran, it's Hezbollah, it's this, it's that, it's Qatar, whatever. It's like, without anybody on the panel asking me, do you have any evidence of what you are saying? You happen to call yourself somebody who's like, fact-based evidence. Where are the evidence? But then you start laughing. It's like, I don't want to see these things. These things are like really propaganda for somebody else, while knowing very well that Israel is preventing journalists from entering Gaza. He is repeating Netanyahu's propaganda, the man that is in charge and executing this genocide, but the man that's preventing international journalists from entering to Gaza. I am confident if Bill Maher, if Van Jones, if Friedman would go to Gaza today, all the propaganda in their head will vanish in seconds, because what we've seen is only probably 20% of the horrors that is being inflicted on Gaza. I know for a fact from a doctor who served in Gaza, she had to deliver a baby from a beheaded woman, and that
Oof.
3 weeks ago. A beheaded woman, they had to deliver her baby. They had to open her and take out the baby. And thus, the killing of women, of children, happens every 10 to 18 hours in Gaza. 10 to 18 hours in Gaza. The level of destruction, but also the level of ferocity of this war is something I think we need to go back to World War I to understand the level of that. And if you put in the equation the famine, the starvation, you put in the equation the fact that they don't have anesthesia and antibiotics, I think we're watching, Gaza becoming the worst extermination camp that we ever seen in our lifetime. I don't know if there is ever existed a Western backed genocide where the level of cruelty and barbarity is such, but it's being laughed at on television at the same time. I don't know if we ever had that in history, because in the past, they have to hide their crimes. I don't think people were laughing about the crimes. Now we are told that what we're seeing is not true, it's propaganda, while Israel is preventing journalists from entering, but also that Palestinian lives are so worthless, are nothing, are worse than human animals, that laughing at them become a legitimate tool of entertainment.
And the fact that the audience laughed, I think it was a mask off moment. And I think it was a mask off moment that will not be forgotten. Van Jones has tried to apologize, but I think it's a revealing moment. And Annelle, these people, like you said, bringing back full circle, were trying to whitewash their bloody hands. People like Sullivan, people like Kirby, people like Blinken. It's not working. And as they are trying to wash their hands, we still see the Democratic establishment right now still willing to spend their time, instead of criticizing Netanyahu and Trump, trying to destroy Mamdani and what Mamdani represents. And a final question to you before I do a final question to Rula, and thank you so much all for staying. We have 1,200 people. They all love you. They all are giving you, this is the most hearts I've ever had. It ain't for me. No one gives me hearts. It's for Annelle and Rula. But we're going to promote you all shamelessly in a few minutes. But for the Democratic Party, you were in the Democratic Biden administration. You were in the State Department. Now you left. You resigned in 2024 because of the Biden complicity in the genocide. Can you make the case, because people won't listen to me, that I yesterday Mallory McMorrow came out finally, said it's a genocide grudgingly. And I think that we have to increase the tent. We have to bring on more people. So I said, it took you a while, but good for you. I said, carrot and the stick. I gave the carrot. I said, well done. Water is warm here. Can you make the case for Democrats that the water is warm here to criticize Israel, to call it a genocide, to say end the occupation? The water is warm, and history will remember you based on your decisions at this moment. Annelle.
I mean, I think the convincing thing may be that to not do that is unlikely to succeed for you politically, just given where Americans
Mm.
are at this point. To continue to support Israel, I don't think is going to be a winning political message, in particular for Democrats. I think it's going to take longer for Republicans because Trump continues to do this. Um, but, so not only is the water warm over here politically and we're willing to welcome you, I just don't see how anyone identifying as a Democrat or especially a progressive would have any political future if they are voting to continue to send bombs and massive amounts of money to Israel. So, and I think the reason, unfortunately, that we haven't yet seen that reflected more definitively has to do with what I was talking about of the corruption of politics, the fact that it's not actually what the American people want that is reflected in politicians' positions, but it's what the lobbies want, it's what the corporations want. But at least for now, we still have a democracy, such as it is, very flawed, and who knows how long it'll survive.
Who knows?
Um, but I think a big part of why Democrats are doing so poorly is because they have not uniformly adopted the position that Israel is committing a genocide. The United States has no business enabling, funding, and supporting this. And I think Democratic numbers would be markedly improved if more establishment figures started to say that. I think it's reflected in candidates coming up for the midterms, many of whom are saying it's a genocide, are making clear they take no AIPAC money. I think these people know where the American people are on this issue. I think one more point I wanted to make just in the last couple minutes here of kind of the losing the propaganda war. I wanted to highlight my colleague Nick Cleveland Stout, his reporting at Responsible Statecraft, which found the figure that Israel is paying influencers $7,000 a post to promote Israel. And it's I want to applaud my colleague and my other colleagues at Responsible Statecraft, because now you can, like, whenever someone posts something in support of Israel, the immediate rejoinder can be, hope you made your 7,000. It's just it's so clear that they've lost the narrative and yet are investing millions more dollars in Hasbara, in propaganda, trying to claw it back, or again just trying to censor so that people no longer see this horrific suffering. And again, with the charade of the deal negotiations happening, can sort of be lulled into this belief, similar to how the United States has always played this role, through the Clinton years, through Oslo, whereby pretending to be supporting a peace process, Americans could feel good about that. Americans could feel like, okay, we're moving towards resolution here. Whereas it's so clear that nothing is going to change until the United States stops supporting Israel. I worry that even though we are seeing a big groundswell in Europe, and the EU is Israel's largest trading partner, and that could have a significant impact, I think as long as the US keeps supporting Israel unconditionally, we're not going to see a change in their behavior. And so it's really on Americans. So while I welcome the fact that the rest of the world and groups like the Hague Group, global South countries have been so steadfast in condemning what Israel is doing, it's on us as Americans. It's on, those of us who live in this country and pay taxes to demand that our representatives no longer vote for this. We have things like the Block the Bomb Act, which is getting more, again, not enough, but more and more sponsors in Congress, and other measures. So just, my plea for listeners is to please reach out to your representatives and demand that they end U.S. support for genocide.
A final question to you, Rula, and I know might be seeing I might be delusional with the way I frame this, but some hope is the fact that in my life and all our lifetimes, who would have thought that we'd have Javier Bardem wearing a keffiyeh at the Emmys, saying, "I'm not gonna deal with Israeli institutions that support the war." Who would have thought that voice of Hind Rajab would have gone a 22-minute standing ovation in Venice? Who would have thought that Greta Thunberg would remain unbowed even after allegedly being mistreated and tortured in Israel, and come back and say, this isn't about me, this is about Palestinians? Who would have thought that you have thousands of people in Sydney, Australia, march for Palestinians? Who would have thought that you would have a majority of Democratic senators, including Bernie Sanders, say end sales? Who would have thought that you would have had any Democrats run away from AIPAC? Who would have thought that Zoran Mamdani could potentially become the next mayor by saying, "Yeah, I'm the mayor of New York, I'm not going to go to Israel, and I'm for Palestinian rights"? What can people do to support Palestinian freedom and end the genocide right now, even though we're going up against such overwhelming odds, it seems? Rula.
Look, wherever you are, I am, convinced that you can do whatever you can. This can stop. The genocide can stop if we stand up together, stand up and stand up together. So in your reality, neutrality is really not an option, because this is is being done in your name and with your money, with your taxes. So if you can boycott Israeli products, please do it. wherever you go. I mean, I'm embarrassed. I entered the other day in a restaurant that I thought would, next to the UN, and I thought it says Aleppo, and I thought like, okay, and then I discovered there was two guys from the IDF just opened it. I'm like, I couldn't believe it. I exited. They were selling, all kind of Palestinian and Lebanese and Syrian food. I was like, wow, the audacity just to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing and then appropriate not only of our territories, lands, but also of our culture and food. I was like stunned. So I had to go. I left, and I understood it was an Israeli, not because of the name, because when I entered, there was a music, and I was like, wait 1 second, this is the Israeli national anthem. Why are they playing the Israeli national anthem in the middle of the day? And then with my friend, I realized like, okay, let's get out of here. I'm confused. But also, you can actually demand respect of the Leahy Law, an American law. You can demand, support whatever initiative wherever you are in your, but the most important thing is to pressure politicians. Without
Yeah.
pressure, it will not change. Without demand, nothing will change. These people will continue to do what they're doing, but also shame and name them. If these people like Van Jones do what they did, people, there was an explosion on internet against him. And I think he thought that he can apologize and just go back. I think they don't understand these people. Their legacy will be defending and justifying the genocide. Exactly like Blinken's legacy will be enabling and facilitating the genocide. Exactly like Joe Biden. So make them understand what the genocide meant to you as a human being, meant to you as an American that is being funded by your taxes. And to Annelle's point that they're paying $7,000 to these influencers. Imagine this, Waj. You have a country that's been committing genocide for the last 2 years. Economy is disastrous in Israel. Yet they're willing to fine $200 million for propaganda purposes. So if you're an American here struggling to pay your taxes or struggling to pay your health care or sending your children to colleges, and yet $30 billion has been shipped to another country to commit genocide, you're also questioning your existence. You're thinking, I'm investing my life, my just paying my taxes, being a good citizen. And then this money goes to Hasbara and to bombing children and to killing children. So this is not really about Palestinians anymore. This is about who you are as an American. And I think this is the moment where this is a Gaza generation. Exactly. There was a Vietnam generation or Iraq generation. This is a Gaza genocide generation. And I think everybody, and I see it in college campuses, in the streets, everywhere. I see it especially in Europe, where Europeans are unwilling to back the government, especially, the European Commission, the European institution, some European governments that continue to supply weapons like Germany and Italy. The banners in the street of Italy, for example, there was 1 million people in the streets of Italy. And the most beautiful banner I seen, and it says, not in our name and not with our money, no more bombs. And then they were demanding actually BDS for the first time. I see this huge things like boycott, sanction, because this is the only way to stop the genocide. But I agree, without America's basically detachment, decoupling from Israel, I am hopeful that there's a global movement for Palestine, but I think the price will be paid by millions of Palestinians. See that movement flourish and see justice in our lifetime, probably the biggest price will be the millions of lives that will be lost in the process and in the fight for justice and liberation.
There's no both sides when it comes to genocide. There's no both sides when it comes to fascism. You have to make a choice, folks. Can't stay neutral. And without American support for Israel, Israel cannot continue the genocide. I want to remind everyone that Ronald Reagan called Prime Minister Begin in 1982 and said, I'm seeing a Holocaust on my television screen. Begin said, with due respect, sir, I know a Holocaust. Reagan said, regardless, I need to see the end to what's happening in Lebanon because he saw war crimes. And then 20 minutes later, Begin called and said, okay, ceasefire. That's the power of the United States. If the president picks up the phone, folks, and says enough, forget days, within an hour, Israel cannot continue its genocide without U.S. support, U.S. weapons, U.S. money. And this is where our voices need to pressure the Democrats who are movable. And also there is movement like I think Annelle said, there's Thomas Massey, Tucker Carlson. There's movement within the right wing as well. So we as Americans especially have to speak up. And we as Americans can actually pressure our government to stop Israel's war crimes and genocide. Thank you, Annelle and Rula. I kept you way longer, but people loved you. Annelle, shamelessly, and I mean it, shamelessly promote yourself. How can people find you? How can people read you? How can people support you?
So I'm on Twitter at Annelle Sheline and also on Instagram at Annelle Sheline, also here on Substack, thanks to you. And then my work is available at the Quincy Institute. I recently, or a few months ago, had a report about how U.S. foreign policy will never actually promote human rights because our foreign policy is actually about selling weapons.
Awesome. Thank you for that hopeful note. No, but you're right. It's true. It's a military industrial complex. Rula.
Same. I am on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram under at Rula Jebreal. But please follow Annelle because she is a crucial voice. And I think I mean, honestly, I am not in a public position, but I think she really deserve a big award. And I hope, and I'm sure a future generation will remember her contribution.
Dr. Annelle Sheline was in the State Department, and she resigned publicly in 2024 because she could no longer be complicit with the Biden administration's participation with Israeli war crimes, which is now a genocide. And now she's with the Quincy Institute. I will link to her work, and she has a Substack. And Rula, her book is Genocidia,
Genocidio.
Genocidio, which hopefully will have an English translation. She's also on social media, and you have to get her on more Substacks. She used to be on MSNBC, but then, she started talking about Palestinian rights, and then she was no longer on MSNBC. And Bill Maher used to have her on, and then she challenged Bill Maher on Palestine and Islamophobia, and then she was no longer on. But she's on everywhere else, folks. Thank you all for joining. Look, this has been going on for 2 years. There was a horrible. You could hold both things at the same time. I want to end on this. You can and should be morally consistent, people. I've tried my best. When I get on Piers Morgan, he said, "Do you condemn Hamas's terror attacks?" And I condemned Hamas's terror attacks. I condemned Islamic Jihad. I condemned Al Qaeda. I condemned Hamas. I condemn bad hummus, and I condemn white supremacy and white supremacist terrorism, and I condemn Israel's genocide. I try to be morally consistent, even though there are obscene double standards. And you, at the same time, can condemn what happened on October 7th. And if you were horrified by what happened on October 7th, the 1,200 Israelis who were killed, then you should be horrified by the genocide that you're seeing in front of you. You should be horrified by the occupation. You should be horrified by the apartheid conditions, and you should do your best to speak out against it. Folks, no one's going back. I ain't going back. Rula's not going back. Annelle's not going back. We're all in this together. Palestinians, no matter how much you try to cleanse them and send them to Jordan and Syria, tell them, Rula, are they ever going to forget?
Never.
Never, ever, ever. And the Jews there, they aren't going back. So we have to find a way to live together. And occupation is not the answer. Genocide is not the answer. Jewish supremacy is not the answer. White supremacy is not the answer. There is a better way forward. We're no longer interested in restoration. We're interested in reformation. And inshallah, people like Rula and Annelle will help us get there. Folks, it's the Left Hook. There are no paywalls. I'm a terrible capitalist. If you can, become a subscriber. If you have some money, give the money to Rula and Annelle. If there's a few dollars left over, feed one of my 800 kids. Be kind to each other. Be informed. And please, oh, please, don't be a fascist and don't be genocidal. Take care. Thank you, Rula. Thank you, Annelle. Thank you for taking time. I know you're so busy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.